What if I told you there exists an official comic where Kirby swears? He also reads Playboy magazine and ogles at sexy lady Kirbys. This same comic also has gruesome dead bodies in it, and a bizarre murder mystery plot too. It's safe to say this is one of the strangest and least kid-friendly Nintendo comics ever written. And today, I want to read through it together. Let's take a look at the official Kirby comic where Kirby swears. So, before we read through the comic itself, we need to quickly talk about what this comic is and who wrote it. It was published in a magazine called Club Nintendo, which ran in Germany throughout the 1990s. It's kind of like the German equivalent of Nintendo Power magazine. And one of the editors who worked on this German magazine was called Claude M. Moyse. Now, Claude Moyse is pretty legendary among video game localizers. He was one of the earliest German video game translators in the industry, and the games that he translated into German were pretty wild. Games like Link's Awakening and Secret of Mana. His German translation of Link's Awakening is pretty infamous, in fact, thanks to the sexual innuendo he added as a little Easter egg. People sometimes complain that Claude Moyse's German translations weren't super faithful to the original Japanese games. And yes, Moyse did go as far as adding a completely brand new song to the German version of the Zelda game he worked on. But on the other hand, the world of game translation was completely different in the 80s and 90s. Oh, and Claude Moyse didn't speak any Japanese, which certainly made things more difficult. He explained in an interview, "Game translations and localizations were still something new back then. It was a bit like the Wild West. There were no real rules yet. I spent 3 or 4 weeks in Tokyo at Square for the German localization of Secret of Mana. At first, they just said, here's the Japanese game, make something of it. First, I had to explain that I don't speak Japanese at all, and that the translation might be a bit difficult. So, I spent the first week of the trip playing the Japanese game and wondering what the characters were talking about. Then, at some point, someone from Square came, beaming with joy, and handed me a text document consisting of the dialogue translated into English. This translation was lousy, but at least you could understand what was meant. So I set about translating the text without knowing where in the game it appeared. A second week passed. Then, in the third week, I was shown the German game with my dialogue in it, and it was just terrible. The text was grammatically and stylistically correct, but it made absolutely no sense in the text boxes it was in. But Claude Moyse had one other job, aside from translating Nintendo's games into German, and that was writing comics for the German Club Nintendo magazine. The process of putting together even just one comic was extremely complicated, though. Nintendo had a group of manga artists working in Tokyo. So, first of all, the German editor sent their idea for the comic to Tokyo. The artists in Tokyo put together a draft and sent it, by post, back to Germany. Then the German editors would make corrections and send the draft back to Tokyo. Finally, the manga artist sent the final comic back to Germany, where the German editor filled in all the text inside the speech bubbles. All that for just one comic. Wow. And what resulted from this long and complicated process were a number of really bizarre German comics featuring Nintendo's characters, including a couple featuring Kirby. I didn't particularly like the Kirby inventor, says Claude Moyse in an interview. My comic was my way of getting even with him, turning Kirby into a freak. So, without any further ado, let's read Claude Moyse's Kirby comic, called Kirby's größter Fall, or in English, Kirby's biggest case. The comic was originally in German, but I'll be showing images from an unofficial English translation. The day began as usual. I sat in my office reading scholarly literature. I continued to read and listen as DDD chattered. Still, I didn't suspect what was going to happen. So, the scene opens with Kirby and DDD in the headquarters of Kirby's detective agency, with Kirby reading a magazine titled Playboy, a parody of Playboy magazine, a magazine most famous for its pictures of naked women dressed in bunny costumes. And sure enough, we see a page of Kirby's magazine featuring a sexily dressed female Kirby. Anyway, Kirby's reading is interrupted by a knock at the door from a woman called Annette. Kirby immediately falls head over heels in love with Annette, rushing off to get her a drink. Annette explains that her grandfather was an amazing scientist called Dr. Mainhold. Just last week, Dr. Mainhold's lab burned down, leaving a single dead body behind. Annette wants Kirby to investigate the case. Was that body really Dr. Mainhold's? So this is the basic premise of the Kirby comic then. What happened to Dr. Mainhold? Kirby goes on a huge, complicated journey to find more clues. He also insists on wearing these sunglasses to look cool, even when he's driving at night. There's a whole saga of Kirby almost crashing into houses and trees because of his ridiculous sunglasses. During his search, Kirby visits a bar where the bartender offers him his usual drink, a cocoa cocktail. Trying to find Annette, Kirby enters the women's bathroom where he is promptly attacked, justifiably so, I think, by the women inside. Next on his search is Annette's family home, this huge mansion. And when Kirby and DDD arrive, they find something horrible. Annette's gruesome dead body sitting at the table. This is very graphic, I think, for a comic about Kirby. It's for kids! Now, lots more happens on Kirby's search for information. He's kidnapped and trapped inside this barn house where he falls into a pile of mud and scares away a family having a picnic nearby. A disgusting, slimy manure monster! Help! He also gets attacked by pirates along with DDD, and then the pair get drugged by the pirates. They manage to escape though when the pirate ship sinks. But eventually, Kirby's search leads him to a deserted island where a huge volcano sits right in the middle. Some of the animals on the island tell Kirby that lots of strange creatures have been coming out of the volcano. That must be where the villain is lurking. And so, Kirby begins climbing up this volcano, when suddenly, he slips and falls. Oops. Shit. That's right, Kirby says shit. The kid's Nintendo character. He just fully swears in this comic. And that's not translated from some German swear word either. In the original German language comic, he says shit in English. I wonder if that's part of the revenge that the author of the comic, Claude Moyse, wanted to enact on Masahiro Sakurai, creator of Kirby. As I read out earlier, it was my way of getting even with him, turning Kirby into a freak, said Moyse. Anyway, Kirby eventually gets inside the volcano, where he's taken to the boss, the true villain behind the deaths of Dr. Mainhold and his granddaughter Annette. And when he takes off his disguise, the villain is revealed to be Dr. Mainhold himself. It turns out he faked his death and even killed his own granddaughter because he made a powerful scientific discovery and didn't want anyone else getting their hands on it. Finally, the volcano starts to erupt, and everyone on the island runs for their lives. And with that, we have reached the end of Kirby's biggest case, one of the strangest and most non-Nintendo comics I've ever seen. You see, if you played through some of the German games that Claude Moyse worked on back in the 90s, you can find little hints as to his sense of humor. But this is totally different. This is an entire story entirely from his mind, and what you get is very interesting, and also not very Kirby-like. In fact, Kirby here is pretty much the opposite of how Masahiro Sakurai designed the character to be. Cute and adorable, not reading sexy magazines and swearing. This comic is a relic of an era when Nintendo weren't so strict about maintaining the integrity of their characters. Back then, Mario didn't look the same in every single game he appeared in. Nowadays, his appearance is completely consistent, even in games that Nintendo themselves didn't develop. And in this current era of Nintendo, this comic would never have been written. Which is precisely why I find it so utterly fascinating. Hey, thanks for watching. Huge thanks to Ivner J. Spider and Final for translating this comic into English. I can speak a tiny bit of German, but nowhere near enough to understand this bizarre story. Oh, and I make videos about strange chapters from Nintendo's history every single week, so subscribe so you don't miss a video. Bye!